This is a rapidly developing story of international intrigue that involves both businesses and governments. What's at stake with this?
Well, of course, there are huge geopolitical stakes and stakes for President Trump and the midterm elections in the U.S. But in Silicon Valley, Softbank and by extension the Saudis have become kind of the funder of last resort for these big late stage privately held tech companies that are trying to put off an IPO for a couple of years. So if the Saudi money goes away, if companies feel like they can't take money from Softbank or from Saudi Arabia, that could kind of put a whole wrench in the entire sort of venture capital market in Silicon Valley.
Several tech leaders have cozied up to the Saudi government, also cozied up to Softbank, not the least of which is Uber, in which Softbank is now a huge investor. Several business leaders have dropped out of an upcoming summit, Davos in the desert. One of them is Uber CEO Dara Khosrowshahi. Complicated because Softbank is one of their backers. Dara saying, "I'm very troubled by the reports about Jamal Khashoggi. We are following the situation closely, and unless a substantially different set of facts emerges, I won't be attending this conference in Riyadh." Eric, not mincing words there, and hard to back down from that statement.
Yeah, this is a very thorny situation for Uber because, sure, there's soul searching about what to do about SoftBank money, but Uber has taken $3.5 billion from the Saudis and has a representative on their board. So the decision to walk away from this conference, and pretty early, sort of before some of the big names had started to pull out, was a tough decision for Dara. But I think there was a calculation that, this is a consumer company that obviously had a terrible year last year for making sort of questionable decisions, and so they needed to move quickly and take a stand.
Meantime, several business leaders have dropped off the board that was supposed to be helping the Saudi government develop this future city. And we haven't, Max, if I'm correct, heard anything yet from Softbank.
No, and as you said, the stock price plummeted earlier today, And it's basically just a situation where Softbank is so enmeshed with the Saudis that it could be very hard for them to untangle this situation. So the Vision Fund is $100 billion. $45 billion of that is money from Saudi Arabia, and this plan for a second Vision Fund calls for another $45 billion, another 25 coming from Softbank. So really, it's the biggest chunk of this fund, so it's hard to see how Masa Son can go through with his plans if there isn't some kind of some kind of story emerges that makes people feel more comfortable doing business with Saudi Arabia.
Eric, you also have a major Saudi ally calling for a boycott of Uber. What's the latest there?
It's never sort of, Uber's always under fire. I think boycott sort of at this point, we'll have to see. I think it's hard to say.
Now, Max, let's talk about some of the other business relationships at stake here. The Saudi Sovereign Wealth Fund also has a huge stake in Tesla, as we've been talking about over the last several weeks. Endeavor, the entertainment company, is in the process of severing ties with the Saudi Sovereign Wealth Fund. They had a $400 million deal that is at stake. How do we expect this to continue to unfold?
You got to think that Elon Musk feels like he dodged a bullet by not, securing funding as he had bragged with the Saudi Arabians, because wow, it would just be yet another crisis for Tesla, and instead they just have to deal with sort of a depressed stock price. So yeah, I mean it's a situation where a few months back, Mohammed bin Salman was sort of going all over the U.S. and having dates with Sergey Brin and many other tech moguls, and it just feels like this whole this kind of romance between Silicon Valley and the Public Investment Fund, maybe not coming to an end, but certainly people are rethinking that relationship right now.
The head of Google Cloud, Diane Greene, also just dropped out of this Davos in the desert, if you will, conference. The U.S. government also has, a very closely watched relationship with the Saudi government. President Trump has said that U.S. officials are looking into this. How the U.S. weighs in on this impact all of these other relationships?
So one thing that I think is interesting, you mentioned the possible boycott of Uber. One thing that's happened to basically every kind of company is everything's becoming politicized. And we saw, earlier today, President Trump kind of, ducking some questions or seeming to defend Saudi Arabia to some extent. And you could imagine a situation where any tech company that has taken money from Saudi Arabia or an entity connected to Saudi Arabia could get wrapped into the same kind of politicization, including boycotts or hashtag campaigns or whatnot that we saw really hurt Uber last year. You could see that spilling over to other companies.
Eric, how big is Uber's business in the Middle East? A business that could potentially be affected as a result of this?
I don't think there's a number to put to it. It's certainly a region that the company sort of is thinking about aggressively, has sort of been in acquisition talks in the region and, wants to remain a major player. The story of Uber internationally has been one of sort of retreat in some ways in China and Southeast Asia and Russia. And so the Middle East is certainly a region where Uber has wanted to sort of have a strong presence. And so I don't think they back away from it because of, this controversy.